In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, we have a special crossover edition. And in this episode, I will share my thoughts on the Milwaukee Bucks and what they should do in the 2025 NBA Draft with Camille Davis from Locked On Bucks. Here we go.
What it do? Welcome to Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis, an NBA analyst with the Locked On Network and co-host of the Technical Foul Podcast. Joining me is Rafael Barlowe of Locked On NBA Big Board and just overall NBA draft extraordinaire. And we truly do appreciate you for tuning in and making Locked On Bucks or Locked On NBA Big Board your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. And today's episode was brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, Rafael, first I got to say just thank you for coming on, spending some time here. I know before I was the host of Locked On, one of my favorite times of the year was when we got to the draft time. And these episodes were normally like my first introduction to the draft class because I've never been someone who was really tapped into the draft, and you do such an excellent job, you and your brother, of just breaking everything down, making the information accessible in addition to understandable about how you feel about the picks. I also just love the way that you guys tend to look at prospects in the sense of it's not like who they are today is who they're always going to be, and really trying to factor in that future forecasting. So I want to thank you for being here and just ask you this question first. What is the general feel or consensus of this draft like? How would you summarize the 2025 NBA draft class?
Well, first of all, thank you for that introduction. I feel a little pressure now to perform. Just the consensus or just the feel for this draft is, I mean, there's just a couple different ways to look at it. One, the draft thinned out with all of the players who decided to go back to school. NIL was a big factor in guys going back to school. I mean, I know some guys that they made more money going back to school than they would have as a first round pick. I mean, there's one guy in particular that the money that he got or is getting, it's like the equivalent of being the 13th pick in the 2025 NBA draft. So I think a lot of players are choosing between, do I go to the NBA and maybe I'm not playing a lot. I mean, we saw 2 lottery picks last year, 2 top 10 picks barely get playing time. And sometimes I think some players are like, man, I know if I stay in school, I'm going to get paid and I'm going to play 30 minutes a night and I can improve my draft stock. So that's one thing. Just all the rumors that we're hearing about this wild draft night and this wild summer, it kind of makes it difficult to pinpoint, all right, is this team picking for themselves or is this pick going to be rerouted? Is this part of a trade? So there's a lot of different factors in as far as like what people are talking about as far as this class.
That makes a lot of sense. And your point about how NIL is changing the draft, that's something else that I wanted to ask you and get your opinion on, because even this year and seeing like the names that put themselves into the draft for just like the early selection, and how many of those guys backed out when it came to the final day. Like it seems like the numbers we're seeing of guys declaring early for the draft are dwindling year after year after year. And now with NIL here, it seems like that's something that we are going to see even more going forward. So do you think that this is a trend of we're going to continue to see less guys declaring for the draft because that money to stay in school is just, it's good money to stay in school? Like you can really start doing those things that people talk about when they go to the league of like, this is money that can change my family's life. So how do you see that playing out going forward? And how does that affect the 2026 draft going forward? Because there were even some names that I was looking at for possible guys for the Bucks in the second round, like a Miles Bird, who I was like, man, that could be a nice little pick there, but went back to school. So just your thoughts on NIL and then how that affects next year's draft as well.
I actually like it. I mean, one, I think it allows players to make careful decisions, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have to jump into the NBA when you're not ready because you need to come up with the money or whatever, or you're not. I mean, you know, guys have been getting paid under the table for a long time. I don't think that's that's a secret, but you just can make so much money and you can be prepared. You can work on your body and so on. And I talked to an assistant NBA GM about it, And he said that he likes it because they don't have to make draft decisions on a player based off of 30 games of college basketball. They feel like, at least the teams feel like, we can make more informed decisions. We can see a guy over 2 years, 3 years, even 4 or 5 years, as opposed to just a small window. And then when teams are looking to fill out their roster with two-way guys, you know that those guys are going to be experienced now. So I think on one hand, I feel like it's a win for college basketball. It helps bring some of the bigger names back. But on the other end, because of the transfer portal, guys are going to be transferring all over the place. So they may be staying in school, which some college basketball fans hated the fact that they weren't able to like build just like I don't want to say relationships, but they weren't able to like stay engaged or just follow players because they just feel like, oh man, he's coming in, he's coming out. Now guys are staying longer. They just might not stay at your school. But overall, I think it's going to help teams make better informed decisions. And I think it's also going to allow players to not rush the process.
And I think that's important too, of not rushing the process, just trying to put yourself in the best positions to succeed, because I'm not a huge college basketball fan, but one thing I was hearing with just the conversation around the game was a lot of fans were gravitating towards the women's game because those players were going to be in college for a few more years. You can develop those relationships, as you were mentioning, of watching a player grow from freshman year to sophomore year to at least junior year for the W players who are interested in going to that league. So seeing more players stay in college, albeit might be at different schools on the men's side, is an interesting way to look at it. And as we kind of continue talking about just the draft as a whole, do you see any particular points in the draft where you feel like there's a steep talent difference? So like you normally tier things out of like, you have your surefire guys like Cooper Flags in the tier of his own. Of course, you have Harper in his own tier. You have the lottery guys, you have the mid first guys, late first guys, early second, mid, so on and so forth. But is there a certain point in the draft this year where you're like, ooh, if you're picking, I don't know, let's say 47th for no particular rhyme or reason, 47th. Is there a part in the draft where you're like, man, if you could find a way to trade up, you'll have a better chance? Because I feel like this tier of guys is the quote unquote last tier of guys who would come in and make an impact right away? Or is their talent just dispersed throughout the draft, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think there's talent dispersed throughout the draft. I mean, you look at Desmond Bane, where he was in the draft. He's exceeded his draft range. You look at Jalen Wells last year, who was a second-round pick. He's exceeded expectations. He outplayed or played more minutes or was more impactful than multiple lottery picks. So I think it's all a crapshoot. And I think that with this draft, because it's an older draft, if you're a team like Milwaukee, you're in the second round, I think you can find a valuable piece or somebody that's experienced that you can plug and play, as opposed to the pressure of, all right, I'm going to take this 19-year-old. We know that he's not ready, but in 4 years he could be ready. And I think for some teams like the Bucks or teams that are trying to contend, those picks just, it's tough because those guys probably aren't going to play. Where are they going to get the minutes to develop? And then if you send them to the G League, it's good experience, but it's almost like it's just kind of keeping them active and allowing them to play. So with that being said, I think way outside the consensus, I did some research. When you look at past drafts going all the way back to like 1990, it's only a handful of times where the top 3 picks all were all-stars. Like really just a handful. And I think it could change with some of the recent drafts. But so with that being said, even if you rank guys in tiers, 5 years from now, the tier could be totally different. So I do the tier ranking, but I don't put a lot of emphasis on it because, like I said, historically, the top 3 picks, who usually in everybody's top tier, historically, the first 3 picks rarely become 3 all-stars in one class.
That's an interesting thing to know, which, man, it sets us up for the continuation of this conversation, which is taking more of that focus towards the Bucks and what this draft pick could look like for the Bucks if they do stay at 47. So let's talk some names for the Bucks, possible names for the Bucks right after this. You know the deal by now. with it being playoff time, playoff season, that means it's time for big performances and even bigger rewards. And DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the rest of the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh and You Score. So anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. So what you would do, you would place an order of $20 or more, use the code Wingstop50 at checkout, and that combo is yours after an NBA player scores 50 or more points in a playoff game. That offer is valid from noon to midnight the day after a game. Of course, terms apply, but if you ever look at your delivery fees and you think like there's got to be a better way, Dash Pass helps you get to that, because with a $0 delivery fee and exclusive perks like this one, how much could you actually save over a season? So here's the play. Make sure you sign up for Dash Pass. Unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. So when any player scores 50 or more points in that playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab that free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 or more order and the code Wingstop50. That's Dash Pass. Your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. Okay, Rafael. So at 47, as I mentioned, the Bucks are picking at 47. It's been one of those summers so far for the Bucks. Another early playoff exit for them. Questions around Giannis and if he was going to be staying in Milwaukee. Recently, reports are coming out that it's seeming more and more likely that Giannis will be remaining in Milwaukee. And we've been talking about a Locked On Bucks of just like, what is the path forward for the Bucks with Giannis? Like, the era of Bucks basketball that we knew, the one that we saw win a championship, it's come to a close. And we think that the game plan for the Bucks going forward has been set with what we've seen to end the regular season when Dame was out with the blood clot initially, which is just a very Giannis-heavy, Giannis-focused offense where the ball is in his hands. He's making the decisions, and you surround him with younger players, fast defenders that can shoot. Because what we saw for the Bucks, they found their most success at the end of the season there with the lineups with Giannis, Gary Trent Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., AJ Green, Bobby Portis Jr. That 5 grouping was just fantastic to end the season. So when thinking about the Bucks in the draft this year, I think that based on what we've been seeing too, with some of the names that have been leaked about who the Bucks are bringing in for workouts, they seem to be looking at older players, more experienced guys that can come in and make an impact right away, like you mentioned before. Whereas last year, they went that route, which surprised me of development, drafting AJ Green or AJ Johnson in the first round, following that up, with Tyler Smith in the second round. But this year, it feels like they might be leaning more in that direction of some more experienced players. Is that in line with what you have been hearing in regards to the Bucks and their workouts and what they might be interested in this year?
I wish I had a better answer, but I have no idea. Nobody seems to know what's going on. I had wrote an article last week, and it got aggregated. And I remember just waking up, logging on to Facebook, and that was the first thing that popped up. And I had mentioned that there's a father of a guy that's a projected lottery pick. And I was talking to him on the phone, and he's like, "Hold on." He's like, "Man, the Milwaukee Bucks, they've called me twice today." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Hey man, I gotta hang up. I gotta take this call." So we never end up finishing the conversation. And I had just tweeted that the Milwaukee Bucks had reached out to a father of a projected top 10 pick, and it got aggregated. And
Of course,
I gained some pretty influential followers on Twitter because of it. But with that being said, I just think the Bucks are doing their due diligence, right?
as they
If
should.
Giannis decides that he wants to leave Milwaukee, then you're going to have to be prepared for that scenario. So with that being said, I don't know. Like, they went super young last year, right? When they were expected to contend for a title this year, and then this year it's like we don't know what the future holds, but you see them bringing in older prospects. I think part of that is because there's not a lot of younger prospects in that range, because all the guys that didn't have like first round guarantees or weren't comfortable with their draft range decided to go back to school. So with that being said, I do think that there are some guys that could help them out. I mean, when I think of like Giannis and the Bucks, I just think of, you need to surround him with shooters, guys that complement him as a downhill driver and slasher. So You have Chaz Lanier from Tennessee, that is a high volume 3-point shooter, and he's very efficient. I don't know if he's available in that range. You got Kobe Brea from Kentucky. The year before at Dayton, he shot like 49% from three. Then you may think, all right, maybe they need to find some depth behind Lopez because he's getting up there in age.
He might not even be here.
Yeah, or not even be there. You got Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton. I'm sure Marquette fans are very familiar with him. He's the 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year and just an automatic bucket when he gets the ball in the paint, but may not offer the floor spacing that you like if Giannis is there. I mean, it's so many options. And with this draft, I think it's weird because I think the first 2 picks are going to be Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper. Mm-hmm. Then, depending on the order, I think you're going to see VJ Edgecombe, Ace Bailey, Trey Johnson in that mix. Then I feel like 6 through 14 is, it's all in the eyes of the beholder. Mm-hmm. 15 through maybe 25. And then after that, 25 through like 50, it could be very scrambled. Like it could be a guy that you think is a late first round pick, but he could end up falling to 47. And so I think for teams this year, especially a team like Milwaukee, they're going to have to cast a wide net. And there's a strong possibility that they may end up drafting a guy that they haven't even brought in for a workout, because so many agents believe that, oh yeah, my guy's in the first round range, so I'm not going to send him to work out for Milwaukee because they're at 47. And I think some of those guys are going to fall.
I mean, I could definitely see that as well. And I know a lot of Bucks fans, and even myself, when I started kind of going through possible draft prospects and starting my little scouting reports on them, like a lot of the names that would interest me around that 47 mark, they tend to be more of the lines of like a two-way wing. Because if you look at the Bucks roster right now, and of course, you're trying to draft best player available. You're not necessarily trying to draft based on what you have currently, because who knows how all of this shakes out in the end of the day anyways. So just get the best player available. But guys like Sion James popped out to me of like, okay, someone who can kind of come in, play that role, that wing defender. Jameer Watkins is somebody else who was on my list of like, man, I could really see him fitting in with this defense, the toughness that he has. Even Hunter Salas, where it's like from Wake Forest, where it's like he had somebody who can fill it up on 3 different levels. But I know there's still some questions around the defense for him. Even RJ Lewis, like I feel like there's some interesting wing names for the Bucks there, especially on that 3-and-D mold, because Andre Jackson Jr., who was currently on the Bucks roster, is one of those guys that a lot of Bucks fans are pointing to, like, hey, if he can, get that offense together, it's a really good step for him going forward. And if the Bucks are bringing back Gary Trent Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., Ryan Rollins, who's another guy, defensive, you have AJ Green. You are seeing a lack of just kind of the bigger wing type of players outside of an Andre Jackson Jr. So are there any wing players for you, second round range, that you think could be a good fit for the Bucks?
Yeah, like the guys that you mentioned, they all have shooting concerns. So
yeah, that's the problem.
Jameer Watkins is not an efficient shooter. He's actually a guy that prefers to get downhill, and he passes up a lot of open threes because he wants to get downhill, but he does draw a lot of foul attempts. RJ Lewis, that's the concern with him. Can he become a better shooter? Hunter Salas, a guy that I'm from Omaha, so I've known his family for a while. So I followed him since, before I even thought he was an NBA prospect. He's a really good mid-range shooter, similar to Ryan Rollins, a guy that I know pretty well. But they both, their bread and butter is in the mid-range. And when you play with Giannis, you gotta extend it out a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And then with Hunter, he had a year as a junior where he shot 40% from 3. And then this year it went down to like in the low 30s, I believe. And so for him, if he can knock down open shots, and I think he could be a good complementary piece because he's a good athlete, solid connective passer, needs to get stronger. But I think that out of the guys that you mentioned, he probably has the most promise as a shooter. Yeah, man, it's like I said, the Bucks are just in a weird situation just because do you build around Giannis, which you have to surround him with shooters, but then again, unless he just says, I want to stay in Milwaukee, you got to try to figure out what to do with this pick. But like I mentioned, Kobe Bryant, Chaz Lanier, I think those guys are shooters. And I'm just, for Bucks fans, I'm going to make the assumption that Giannis is coming back. I think that John Tanji, another guy from Wisconsin, is a shooter. I mean, he had some absolutely phenomenal performances late in the year, a little bit older, but I think he could be like your plug and play guy that has the size and the outside shooting. Then if you want to go with like a really good connective player, I think Tyrese Proctor from Duke could be in that range. He's a player that I thought after his freshman year, I thought he was going to be like just a big jumbo point guard. Got moved off the ball towards his sophomore year and junior year, but he shot the ball well this year. Mm-hmm. And the role that he played at Duke, complementing Cooper Flagg and complementing, some of the guys that he played with that were like lottery picks, I think it's going to be very easy for him to come in and play that same role because he's used to playing it. And it's not going to be a situation where he's going to have to go from, I was the man, I was getting 15 shots a game, to now I just got to stand in a corner. So I think he would be an intriguing fit there.
Okay. I have one more name I wanted to ask you about his fit with the Bucks, because he's a player who clicks that defensive box, and the scoring this year seemed like it was sustainable, but it was the first year we've seen him shoot at that level from my understanding. So I want to get your opinion on him, as well as some guys who keep an eye on in case, the Bucks do look for another two-way guy or undrafted guys who could be contributors going forward, as well as, of course, asking if the Bucks did trade Giannis, taking a look at some guys in the lottery, as well as if the Bucks just look to trade up in general, what that could look like for them. So we'll talk a bit more about that right after this. I know that I can't be the only one who has ever looked at their bank account and just kind of been like, where did my money go? For me personally, I'm a big online shopper, video games, movies, entertainment, and all of that stuff. So that's normally where my money goes. And that's also why Monarch Money has been helpful for me, because it's like a personal CFO. It helps give you the full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, your spending all in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and actually start to build wealth. It has all-in-one convenience, so instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. And if you have a partner, it has such easy collaboration, which makes managing money with your partner smoother than ever. You can track shared accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without all of the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. I mentioned a name. I'm just interested in your feel on this guy. Out of Georgetown, Micah Peavy. Again, had the defense. That's been part of his, scouting profile for a while now. And this past year is when he showed some offensive firepower that hadn't been seen before. And I guess the question is, how sustainable was that leap that he took with his shooting? Is that real? Is that a mirage? And just how do you feel about Micah Peavy as a prospect?
That's the $1 million question. I live in the Dallas area, so I've followed Peavy for a while. His dad was a coach at one of the top high schools here, and then he played college ball at two different schools at TCU and Texas Tech. So I'm pretty familiar with his game. That's like the tricky question with him. Was it a bad fit at those other schools, and he got the right fit and made the right choice to go to Georgetown, and he was able to unlock everything that he already had? Or is it just an outlier year? I mean, I look at Texas Tech, for example. They had Jalen Tyson. I think they were teammates, if I'm not mistaken. Jalen Tyson goes to Texas Tech. He's not on anybody's radar as an NBA prospect. He goes to Cal, and all of a sudden at Cal, he's like playing point forward. He's scoring 20 points per game. He's passing, he's rebounding, and boom, he's a first-round pick. And so Peavy could end up, it could be similar for him. He just always had the talent, always had the game, and just didn't play in the right fit in the right system. But what I love about Peavy is he has the positional size. He can defend. at least based off the numbers this year, he can knock down open shots. And I think that's the type of plug and play guy that you're looking for if you're Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Giannis is back and you're still trying to compete, because I mean, obviously you want Giannis to stay. I think with Boston and the situation with Tatum being down, it might even out the situation the Bucks have with Lillard being out. You got to figure that the second apron is going to tear the Pacers down, because that's a team
eventually,
that necessarily like to pay the tax. I don't even know if they've paid the tax. So I still think with Giannis, you're still in that range. You just got to find the pieces around him. And if Giannis wants to be patient, and the front office, they're going to have to get creative because they don't have a lot of picks. But I still think that with the East being wide open the way it is, I mean, Phillies, I mean, they're
figuring it out,
but they're kind of young. But I don't know what's going on there. So I think a guy like Peavy could be like the best option for Milwaukee at 47 if he's available.
Okay, see, something to think about.
And you know your stuff, so
you know a little bit.
Like be like, oh, I don't know what I've just. You've obviously done your homework, so
I try to. You know, when you get paid the dollars to do it, you got to put the time in behind it. But no, you know, we talked a little bit before going on air too of just like I love this stuff, and being able to talk about this it's a joy, truly, to the point where even like right now, I'm not feeling the greatest, but I'm having a good time. And I just want to pick your brain here in this last segment for a couple of other things that have been on my mind about this draft and the Bucks. Players who might go undrafted that you think could have good two-way potential, because the Bucks have found some recent success with their two-way guys. I mentioned AJ Green, Ryan Rollins, two guys who started here on two-way contracts, end up playing a role in the playoffs down the stretch here for the team, more so AJ Green than Rollins. But I see a pathway forward for Ryan Rollins this upcoming season, especially with that Dame injury, that could really get him some quality playing time and he could be a good role player. Then, of course, you have guys like Alex Caruso, who we're seeing in the finals, Lou Dort. We've seen Naz Reid, just guys who started with two-way contracts but have crafted real rotational roles. Are there any guys who are currently looking at being in that undrafted range that you think could make really interesting two-way prospects?
I think so. But before that, I want to share a quick Ryan Rollins story.
Oh, love that. Go ahead.
So, a couple of years ago, I was in Detroit doing some work, and then I went to Toledo to go watch a preseason game between Toledo and like some small school from Iowa. And I fell in love with Ryan Rollins, and I ranked him as a potential first round pick. I think I had him at like number 30. And I was working with Chad Ford, the great Chad Ford from ESPN Insider, just before he ended up transferring the NBA Big Board over to me. And we did a pod, and I had Ryan Rollins as like a first round pick. And nobody had heard of him at this point, to the point where Chad thought I was like bigging up like my homeboy. so he ended up calling some teams, and they was like, who's this guy? And they were like, no, he's within that range. I don't know about first round pick, but he's definitely somebody that's on our radar. So from that point, I ended up like developing a relationship with Ryan, and he's actually here in Dallas right now. So I'll probably try to catch up with him later on this week. So I'm a big fan of Ryan Rollins. I'm rooting for him in Milwaukee. I think he started like a playoff game. Or got early minutes in the first
early minutes in the playoffs.
So definitely rooting for him. And then there's Tyler Smith, a guy who I've followed for quite a while, and he actually came on my podcast last year. So I'm watching the Bucks. I'm paying attention. I thought the AJ Johnson pick was a little strange, but I'm rooting for the Bucks. So with that being said, I guess what you're looking for is the 61st pick.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have a good answer for you, because the guys that I thought were going to be in that range might get drafted in the 40s because 20-something players pulled out.
Yeah.
And so now what I think on draft day, I think it could lead to a situation where, and it's very risky. I know Austin Reeves' agent did it a few years ago, where if I'm an agent and I have the full trust of my client and his family, and I think Giannis is coming back, and if I'm a shooter, I may say, hey, you know what? Let's tell all these other teams picking ahead, we don't want a two-way, we want a guaranteed deal. Have them pass us up. And I tell my client, you're going to risk not getting your name called. But I think with your shooting, there's a chance you can crack the Bucks rotation early. And if you're playing with Giannis, you're going to get open looks.
Wide open.
So with that being said, I think there could be a situation where some agents are trying to control the situation and put their client in the best situation to start off with a two-way that can get converted into a standard contract. And so, like I said, with that being said, I do think depending on what happens with Giannis, and even if Giannis doesn't come back, I think that's going to even lead to more of that situation because some agents are going to say it's a rebuilding situation. They're a young team. They're going to play as many people as possible. Maybe this is a spot where you can come in and get your two-way converted to a standard contract. So I think it's going to be interesting for Milwaukee, either or. But man, there's a name that comes to mind. I would take him in the first round.
Okay.
But there's some people that don't think he'll get drafted, and it is Hansen Yang from China.
That, yes. And I know Bucks fans are probably like, I don't know. Last time we reached out for a prospect, a Chinese prospect, the Yi situation. But what is the I've heard Yang has been moving, and he was someone at the combine as well who kind of showed out a bit. But what is it about his game that you think is like NBA ready, in your opinion, even first round grade on it?
Yeah, he's a very, very gifted low post scorer. He's got counter moves on top of counter moves. If you're a Bucks fan and you're interested in him, you can probably find it on YouTube. There's a game where he played Alex Sarr at the FIBA U18s. Sarr couldn't guard him. Sarr's a pretty good defender. He's skilled on the block, phenomenal passer, like really, really gifted passer. And then he's a guy that can rebound. I mean, like for me, it's like, all right, if Zach Edey can play in the NBA, then I think Hansen Yang can. Yang he's massive. He's not as big as Edey, but I think he has more stuff to his game as far as being in the low post. I mean, Edey's so big and dominant, he's just going to hit you with a jump hook. But he's got exceptional touch. But Yang is, to me, a better passer. He just has more counters on the block. Similar to Edey, it's going to take some time to adjust to like the speed of the game. He's going to have to find the right fit. But he's not a guy that's going to wow you at like a combine setting as far as like the athletic testing. Just like I don't think Jokic would have been impressive running like shuttle drills and vertical testing. But you put 9 guys on the floor, put the ball in his hands, he's going to be effective. And I thought Yang was pretty good at the combine, despite the fact that the team he was on didn't have any point guards that could, make an entry pass. And he's still productive. He rebounded. So if he's available at 47, I would take him at 47. And if he just so happens to go undrafted, that's the first call I'm making.
That is good to know. Well, we are running on time. I have one more question, and it's around the trade aspect of it. I have heard from what I've been reading and guys who are tapped in of just making mention of the fact that the trade movement that could be happening in this draft is really like end of the first round, early second, or late lottery, just some teams that might have multiple draft picks and aren't really looking to bring on that many guys. What intel have you heard about trades possibly happening in the late first or early second? And do you think, based on the limited assets that the Bucks do have, could it be a way that the Bucks could find themselves in a conversation where they're actually trading up, not necessarily trading up for the Giannis trade, but just trading up in the draft because there are other teams that are looking, to kind of consolidate draft picks?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I've heard that there are some teams that don't have draft picks that are trying to get back up in the first round. But then I've heard there's some teams that they may have a guy that they like, that they feel like they can trade back to get him. So I do think that it is possible. And maybe, and I'm just throwing something out here, but maybe there's a team that likes Gary Trent and they feel like we're one shooter away. Like I look at Orlando, for example. Orlando has 2 picks in the first round. I think 15 and like 25. Orlando needs some shooting really, really bad. Now, I mean, the Bucks probably don't want to give up a shooter, but maybe Orlando says, man, you know what? We'll take Gary Trent because he'll make Banchero and Franz Wagner better. And then maybe it's just some type of move that they can make, because I think Orlando needs to consolidate some of their guards. And then then there's also teams that want to get off contracts. So I think it's possible. I mean, I think it's going to be very creative, but I think it's possible.
Okay. Well, something to keep an eye on. And listen, as we wrap up here, again, thank you for your time. And I got to make sure for all the listeners, all the everydayers, thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen. And for your second listen, especially after this episode, how can you not go and check out Locked On NBA Big Board? Rafael Barlowe is there with his brother James Barlowe, reacting to workouts, interviews, rumors leading up to the NBA draft. So make sure that y'all are tapped in with Locked On NBA Draft Board. Be tapped in with the written work as well, with the Substack, with the website. Rafael, is there anything you want to plug here as you're making your march up to the draft? I know this is a really busy time for you. So where can the people find your work and what you're doing? Because you are tapped in. So you are a voice that the people need to be listening to.
Yeah, I mean, you set it off for me. NBABigBoard.com. That's my Substack and my newsletter. And then there is the podcast at Locked On NBA Big Board. So thank you for the shout out and the plug. So, but yeah, anytime you want to do it again, let me know.
Oh, for sure. So thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened to this episode. Make sure you come back tomorrow for more Locked On Bucks.